So scaling Poco Bero's email marketing channel to $10,000 a month. Let's go. So listen, just to give you guys some context, Poco Bero is a CPG brand that sells pizza dough balls. So they make the pizza dough in New York, right? Just they make it with New York water, flour, all that stuff. Package it, ship it out to all around the country. So that's Poco Bero. Shout out John if you're watching this. But just to give you more context on the project, right? When we hopped on, we really had no previous data to work off of. Just to give you context, they literally launched 0 campaigns, which might be the same for you. If you have your own CPG brand, you're like, oh man, I don't know where to start because I launched 0 campaigns, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so and I'll get it to the next slide. But they had a few flows already, but we really didn't have any campaigns. And the reason why that's so important is because it didn't tell us any past customer engagement. So when we were launching the first campaign, we really didn't know how many people were going to be responding to it. And I'll tell you kind of how we combated that in a second. But we really didn't really know what the customer engagement rate was. So there was a high chance that if we just send out to pretty much everybody in one shot, we might get sent to spam, and then just ruin the deliverability or even get banned, or flag the actual email address. So really had no previous data. So they had solid flows. So they actually had a few flows set up with good decent amount of emails, cool designs, but they really had no structure to it, right? So again, they had good open rates, good click through rates, and their conversion rate was actually pretty good. I mean, for some of the brands we've worked with in the past, but again, no really structure was there. Email was there, so their emails were just there to be there, right? So for example, in the welcome flow, you typically want to have the first email just be the discount, maybe a little bit of info on the brand, and then just give some context on the backstory and all that, more about the product and products, features, and benefits. And then as you go along the flow, you tell them more about the company, more about the product itself, how you guys make it, specific unique selling points about the brand or about the product. And with Poco Bero, they didn't really have any of that, right? They had some solid flows. They had really good emails as far as the designs. Like, they had pretty good solid designs. But again, they really had no structure as in, okay, this email is going to be meant for just a feature and benefit. Like, aside from the first email, every other one after that was just kind of random. It was just about the founder, and they had a few unique selling points, but I think one of them was just about a random discount, and it really had no structure within the welcome flow. So again, we really had to work on setting up their flows to have more structure in them. And then the last thing was they really had a 0 content strategy, right? They didn't run any valuetainment or edutainment campaigns or content. Just to give you context, valuetainment, valuable, entertainment, valuable, valuetainment, valuable, entertainment, edutainment, educational, entertainment. And again, for email marketing, it could be top 3 ways to do X, Y, Z, or 4 things you didn't know about the pizza industry in this case, right? So they didn't really run any VT or ET content. They had cool designs, but pretty generic things overall. So they really didn't focus on actually building out the brand. Again, done by VT and ET content. And really had 0 hype about promos or discounts. So just to give you context, really no previous data. We didn't really know how much people were going to engage with the emails when we start sending them out. Solid flows. They had cool designs and everything, but no structure behind those flows to support the people actually looking at them. And then 0 content strategy. They didn't really know, okay, this is a valuetainment campaign, an edutainment campaign. This is not something that we're going to be representing in the brand, right? So that's a little bit of context. Next is crafting. So pretty much walking you through how we actually scaled them up to $10,000 a month in email marketing is crafting effective pop-up forms. So one of the first things we did was obviously they had a pop-up form running already, and it was around, I think it was 5-6%. But we wanted to test things out and make sure that at the very least we test out different offers, different designs, and more importantly, just different ways of presenting the offers, right? So the first thing is the discount offer. Let me move that. The first thing is the discounted offers, right? Testing different discount percentages and the dollar amounts, right? Such as you could do 10% off, $10 off, $15 off, 15% off, right? And then from there, analyze the different offers that resonate best with the audience, and then go from there, right? The next thing that we ended up doing was value-added incentives. Now, this is quite interesting. I don't think a lot of brands do this, especially ones that maybe the product is a little bit of a higher selling point and the customer actually needs a little bit more, I guess, info to actually educate them about what the product is. But even for your brand, right, experimenting with non-discount incentives, me and John were talking about ebooks for a second, mystery gifts that that could be working really well. And again, it's meant to attract subscribers to be interested in more than just savings, right? Instead of, okay, let me just get $15 off, 15% off, but instead educate them about learning more about the brand. What's the unique selling points? What's the thing that's going to make me want to buy this specific product or on this brand aside from everybody else in the marketplace, right? So value added incentives for your pop-up form. The next thing we ended up doing was design variations. This one was actually quite simple. Like I don't think a lot of brands need to make some crazy designs. And funny enough, that's how we all kind of got connected. My partner Christian ended up talking with John, and they ended up talking about like the design variations. But what ended up happening was the design is could be very very simple. They don't really need a lot of prepping up. They don't need to be some crazy designs with flowers or anything, unless you're maybe using something like Aaliyah, like a software like that, which it's meant to be very colorful and tell more about the story. But for a basic pop-up form, it's really having a good solid offer, something that people want to really buy, and not having too much stuff to confuse it. So really like less than 10 words of text for your pop-up form, right? And the last thing is A/B test, right? So obviously we could test one thing at a time and say, okay, we're going to test 10% off, and then we're going to test 10%, $10 off a week this time and a week this time. So like 2 weeks to test two offers, instead of just saying, okay, let's just do both different offers in 1 week and just try testing them both out. So A/B test, continuing A/B test on the copy, the imagery, the call to action buttons, and then the offer itself, right? And then again, use data driven insights to refine and improve your forms over time. All that means is when you actually get data, use it, right? If you say, okay, if you make like 5 different tests and you know every single time you test it, if it's like a 10% off against a $10 off and $10 off crush for you guys every single time, don't make the sixth test about $7 off versus 7% off. Generally, you know that $10 off works best for you. Optimize for that. So instead of doing $10, try $15 and see what the conversion rate is and see if it's actually worth running for the margins of your brand. So again, the thing we had to work with them is creating effective pop-up forms. And yeah, so the next thing is structuring winning email campaigns. Now, as I mentioned, they really had no zero campaigns like at all, right? They really had no zero campaigns. All they were running was flows, which weren't working that bad. But again, the email campaign, just to give you perspective, it should be about 50% of your email marketing, right? So what I happened on the call was like, listen, when we first talked, it's like 50% of your revenue is being missed out on, right? Because you're just not launching email campaigns. And I think a lot of brands overlook that and say like, oh, okay, we're already doing email marketing. It's like, are you really? Because the question is, are you sure? You might be running a few email flows at the time, but if you're not running email campaigns, which is the backbone of actually building your brand and getting people to buy from you again and again and again, you're not really doing anything. That's why you got to set up your email campaigns to say, you know what, I'm not going to miss out on building my brand, and I'm not going to miss out on 50% of my revenue. Which in reality, if you're just running flows, that would be doubling your email marketing revenue. So again, the first thing we had to do was establish a cadence, right? So again, if it's your own particular brand or CPG brand, get your customers used to seeing your emails, right? Personally, for Poco Bero, we're doing 2 graphic heavy emails every week, 1 text based email every week, and then 1 newsletter every week as well. So a total of 4 emails. So for example, Monday, Wednesday we'll run 2 graphic based emails. Friday we'll run a text based email, and then a newsletter on Sunday. Which that's a newsletter is more just to kind of be evergreen. It tells updates about the company, top stories about the week, like the pizza. I think we have like a pizza fact of the week, so we have that. But again, we just wanted to get an established cadence so people could get used to like, okay, these days people are sending Poco Bero sending a certain amount of emails, and they're getting used to opening them, right? The next thing is incorporating promotions, right? So this is not really a big thing because I don't talk about promotions too heavily, but again, just run a big promotion campaign once every 2 weeks. As I mentioned, just don't make sure you send them out again and again and again. I think if you send at least 1 a week, that's too much. I'm going to be honest, because you're kind of devaluating the actual promotion itself. It's like if it's like you go past, what it's like if you go past that one store that says store will be closing, like crazy sellout, everything must go, and like 5 months later you know that they're still doing the exact same thing. Real thing, because it actually happens like 5 blocks away from my house right now. But the point is, it's like the more you do something, the more it gets devaluated, right? So don't run promotions too heavily every single week. Nonetheless, every single time you send a campaign, but still, it's good to have it maybe once every 2 weeks, once or twice a month to get people excited to want to come back to your brand as well. So we run incorporating promotions once every 2 weeks. The next thing, as I mentioned, develop VT and ET content. Again, valuetainment and edutainment content. Again, that makes people, like subscribers to your emails, genuinely want to receive your emails. For Poco Bero, this included a heavy focus on, I think we just talked about this with John, pizza recipes, pizza myths and truths debunked, crazy pizza topping pairings, and all that sort of content to make people say like, okay, this is actually, they're not heavily selling me right now, But if it's a cool design and I actually want to read it, if it's cool facts that I didn't know, and and it's very digestible chunks, you'll be fine. And again, I'm not saying don't promote your products at the end. Say like, okay, these are the top three ways not to make pizza. Top three ways to make pizza 100 times better to eat. And then at the end, once want the secret ingredients out of a secret ingredient out of everything, pizza dough, the perfect pizza dough from New York, and then have your CTA there. So again, develop more VT and ET content. The next thing, find engaged audience, right? As I mentioned, zero data to work with, and this is quite important, especially if you don't really have any previous data to work off of. But we needed to test a small audience and build from there, right? So every campaign that we launch, we pretty much not double, but 50% increase every time we launch. Because again, as I mentioned, if you have like and I just spoke to another brand, they had like 120,000 email lists, and it was crazy, but they didn't really know how to use it. So I'll tell you a quick story. They used, from what I know, they used the campaigns, or they used their email list, and the first day they sent out to pretty much everybody. Nothing bad. They actually made like $2,000 in one day. Boom. Like that was crazy, right? $2,000 in one day. They did it awesome, right? 120,000 people received it. I think it was the next following day, or like 2 days after that, they did it again. Another $2,000. They did it again. Another $2,000. And you're expecting me to say, okay, the other day maybe 1,500, maybe 3,000. Next day they actually get flagged for sending too many spam emails, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that when you're starting out with a new brand, even if you have especially if you have like this big entire list, and big for you guys can mean 2,000, 10,000 subscribers, make sure you don't send out to everybody at once. Make sure you test it out, even with a very, very small list, and then from there see, okay, we got 20% engagement. That's way too big. Okay, let's shorten the list by half. Okay, now we're at 40%. Okay, what if we shorten the list a little bit more? Okay, we're at 50%. And once you're at 50%, try to stay at that level. So if you send out a list to 1,000, and out of that 1,000 people that you send the email out to, you get a 50% open rate. Stay with that 50, or let's say that you get 30% open rate. Keep sending to that 1,000 until you get to 50% open rate. And then once you get a 50% open rate, you could expand your list a little more. And then you're going to go down. Maybe you're going to be at 30%. But then send to that list again and again and again to warm up those leads pretty much. And then again, go up to your next big list, which could be like by a 50% increase. So start small and then build your way up, especially if you don't really have any past data to work off of. So again, we pretty much had to work from start, but now we have a good cadence of emails, and I think with the minimum we're getting at least 40%, 45% open rates. So that's pretty good. The next thing is optimizing email flows for conversions. Okay, so again, restructuring the existing flows they had. Okay, just to give you like a brief overview. They had actually a few email flows already. The main ones that they had were the welcome flow, the checkout flow, and the post purchase sequences, right? But they had a lot of minute kind of amateur things to make better, to say the least. So it was like it's just basic mistakes, right? They had a fixed time delays. They had to fix their time delays. They had again, as I mentioned, in chronological order of email sequences. So like the first email was like the 10% off that they had in their pop-up form, and then the second email was like about the founder, and the third email was like another promotion that had nothing to do with the actual pop-up form that they received. So it was very inconsistent, so we had to make it more chronological. And then of course like revamp the subject lines. Literally, no joke. And again, I have no, obviously John actually wasn't the guy that owns the company wasn't the guy actually creating the flows. He had somebody else do it, and they make amazing designs, props to them. But they didn't really know how to actually structure an email channel or an email flow or an email campaign nonetheless. So as I mentioned, they didn't really know how to have good subject lines. I think one was like "one pizza tonight," and it was a question mark, and then no emojis, no nothing. And I'll just say this: the open rates weren't that great, so we had to work with it. And so again, revamp the subject lines, and again, the improved design choices. They had really cool designs, but like little minute things, like they had a lot of empty space in the email, which people like get like, okay, well, what is this empty space? They kind of just go through everything without reading it. A CTA under the fold, again, you want to have your CTA be above the fold and say like, okay, I don't really have to scroll or anything. If the offer is there, just click on it right then and there. And then just easier to digest. As I mentioned, some text had like a lot of words, so we had to kind of cut back on that, shorten the copy, and then make just a lot more digestible chunks instead of having like one big paragraph. But again, just restructure the existing flows. The next thing was implementing new flows, right? And this is really, really big because I think a lot of people kind of miss out on the fact that they might have, their welcome flow, and that's all they have, and they think, okay, this is the greatest thing in the world. This welcome flow is making me, 5%, 10% of my entire online revenue, which is good. Don't get me wrong. That's great. It's awesome. But you're missing out on so much more if you don't have the other flow set up. and which I'm about to walk you through, right? Subscription flow, replenishment flow, browse abandon flow, cart abandon. Cart abandon and checkout are huge, especially just for the percentage of like how much each time you send out is worth. So, for example, if a checkout flow is sent out to 1,000 people, the average like, and out of those 1,000 people, you make $1,000 worth of sales. Every time you send out an email, it's worth $1. So checkout flows and abandoned checkout flows and abandoned cart flows are really good for that. They have like really high ratio of money to people being sent the emails. Subscription flow, replenishment flow, browse abandon, cart abandon, VIP flow, that's super underrated, and anniversary as well. Win back sequences to capture more conversion opportunities and just scrape the other leads that we didn't really have that are not digesting our content. But essentially just implement new flows. They didn't really have many to start off with, so we just had to kind of revamp that and add more flows overall. Next thing is beef up the number of emails. This is big too. You might have a welcome flow, and I just spoke to another brand. They make sunscreen. It's a really cool brand. We actually signed them as a client, so shout out Ice Cream Sunscreen. But in their welcome flow, they only had like about 3 emails, right? And generally, I know it wasn't the biggest brand, so they didn't need to have so much complex things, but they didn't have enough emails where it introduces the brand in a way that makes sense for the customer. Meaning, within the welcome flow, I think they had the discount off, and then they had maybe like, I think it was like about the founder, and then like a unique selling point about the product. But if you're working with a lot of leads that you're getting from your pop-up form, then expand onto that. What are the unique selling points? What are the features and benefits about the product? What are some of the different offers we have? Okay, is it just, for example, like if you look at a brand like Points or the Hummy brand, where they only sell like little M&Ms. If you look at a company that sells one specific product, what are the unique things about that product? And if they sell additional products outside of that, chocolate based, for example, like this little chocolate bites, then you look at it, okay, what other products do I have? Maybe I want to try something else, right? So just beef up the number of emails that they have to give more context of your brand and to give your audience different choices to choose from. So different options to choose from. So just beef up the number of emails. And then again, continuous optimizations. I'll put it very simply: testing the subject lines, design choices, testing the design choices, testing the text and versus graphic based emails, CTAs, but most important part, you have to optimize. I mentioned this briefly a minute ago, but if you know you're testing something out and every time you test it out, you get the same result, and okay, test A works better than test B, and you still keep making tests around test B, that's so dumb because you're not optimizing for that. As I mentioned, if you have a $10 pop-up form running against a 10% pop-up form running, and the $10 pop-up form crushes every single time, and then the next A/B test you're still running the 10% off or maybe a 15% off, why are you going to optimize for something that you know it's not converting well? Instead, focus on what works. Focus, okay, generally people want $1 off instead of a percentage off. Look at the dollar off and say, okay, if it's at $10 off, what if I make it $15 off? It might cut into my margins, but how many people are we going to collect leads from? How many people are we going to collect emails from? And is it worth it at that point to make it at $15, right? So again, optimize for your tests. That's really big, and we're doing that at the moment. Again, this is I'll just brief on this very easily, but the golden rule of email marketing success. It's quite simple, but I think a lot of people get it wrong at times because they kind of overwhelm it. And pretty much I'll summarize this entire thing into one little thing. Designs make people click. Strategy makes people convert. You may have, as I mentioned, the best design in the world. Poco, Bero, when we started with them, they had really good designers. It was top notch. It was really good. But the problem was that they had no structure or strategy behind it. If you make a cool looking design, but in reality it doesn't make the people seeing it convert, it doesn't have a compelling CTA, it doesn't have a compelling offer, it isn't in digestible chunks, it doesn't it doesn't give the audience the information they need to make a choice about the product they want. It doesn't give them a choice about what they actually need, right? If you don't have any strategy behind your email designs, they're not going to convert. So again, design attracts, strategy converts, but balance is key. It's amazing, and listen, if you have the best designers, it's awesome and it's good to keep them, but make sure you sit them down, or even if it's yourself, and say, like, listen, we want to have a strategy behind this, either whether it's somebody else in-house, somebody that knows marketing, an agency, whatever the case, have that backbone to say, okay, we have the best email designers, let's get the best strategy to actually go through with the designs. So again, the golden rule of email marketing: designs make people click and strategy makes people convert. And then this is just a little bonus I wanted to include. I keep mentioning valuetainment and edutainment based campaigns, and I know for some of you, you're like maybe the first time you walk into the channel, or maybe you're like, oh, what should my emails look like? This is a good example of like what valuetainment and edutainment based campaigns should look like. But yeah, let me walk you through it. So like obviously you got about the founder, weekly newsletter, valuetainment, and emails. And again, I'll walk you through about the founder. It's very digestible chunks. As you can see, this one's a little bit more hefty because it's about the founder. It's meant to be a little bit more digestible, but it's very short, right? You don't want to make the emails too long. But again, it gives perspective about the actual like what you want to be shown in the email, right? So the master behind Poco Bero's dough, unveiling John, and it gives a little description, a little quote, shop pizza supplies. Next thing, the Poco Bero time. This is a weekly newsletter we make for Poco Bero. As I mentioned, we started doing that, and this is what it looks like. Weekly newsletter. Hey there, welcome to your weekly slice of Poco Bero. We're here to share your inbox of behind the scenes peeks at what's cooking in the community, right? Then just to give you some perspective, the week spotlight. If your brand has a very heavy community or very big social media following, you could say, okay, this week's spotlight, John Tapia from North Carolina ended up using our product, and he shared it with his entire family, or he used it in this way. Maybe you have gym equipment, or maybe you're selling like a Gymshark type of brand. Okay, this was the biggest accomplishment this person did using our merch, and you don't even have to include your like, okay, it was because of our merch, obviously, but just include it. It's cool to have your community based in your weekly newsletter. Nice little pizza fact. Obviously, you have that down there. And then pizza myths busted. Shop now, top 3 facts revealed. As I mentioned, it's very digestible chunks. It's literally one sentence in every single one. And in email format, it's a lot bigger, so it's even more digestible. But these are very, very simple. Obviously, it's not the whole email, but you get the point. So again, bonus look at inside campaigns. This should give you a good idea of what your campaigns should look like when you send them out, even for flow emails. IX Media. Do you have a six-figure year brand? Listen, as I mentioned, my name's Alex from IX Media. We help CPG and e-com brands scale their business using email marketing. 2 quick things. I'll be quick with it. Number one, we work in a 100% commission base. As I mentioned, if your brand is making over $6,000 a year, 6 figures a year, and you're in the CPG or e-com brand space, then we would love to work with you. Obviously, we have to see if we can even help in the first place, but we'd love to book a call with you. And again, we have the saying, we only get rich if you get wealthy. We are only going to make money ever if you get money first. And again, we run on a 100% commission base. The second thing, complete email setup. When we integrate ourselves with a brand, we don't focus on, okay, we're going to be there for one day and then dip. No, we're going to be a complete email strategy, campaigns, flow, strategizing behind the content, a content calendar, email designs, full Klaviyo setup, and more, right? And mucho más, by the way, for you can figure out what that means out. So again, email marketing. You could be nosy, look at ixmedia.com. We have our website and the link in the description. You can check us out there. You can just see a little bit more about what we do, how we do it, and how we might be able to help your brand in the future. So, listen, as I mentioned, my name is Alex and Alexander Jimenez the Great from IX Media. We'd love to work with you at the very least. I hope you got some value out of this video. Again, we'd love to see you another day. And as always, I hope God blesses you in every way. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.